Okay, hey everybody, welcome back. I hope you had a good spring break. Tonight we're going to be talking about fertilizers and viticulture, and originally I was planning on doing fertilizers and irrigation, but the content for fertilizers was too long, so we'll do irrigation next week. And for reference, we have chapters 16 and 17 in general viticulture, chapters 11, 12, 17, 18 in Grape Growers Handbook. By no means did we cover what's completely in those chapters. That is just additional resources for your knowledge. This presentation is really just the tip of the iceberg, kind of conceptual knowledge about fertilizers, why they're important, how they're applied. If you would like to get into like what type of pump to select for a well and so much more information, definitely look into that part of the textbooks. Also, I have uploaded to Canvas an additional lecture from my Viti 303 class that we offer in the fall that goes much more into nutrient analysis and determination for vineyards. So again, you won't be required to read these things or look into these things, but if you would like to get the maximum benefit from this course or from learning this material, it's available for you. So that is there for you when you're ready, if you want it. So we'll just go ahead and get into fertilizers and viticulture for tonight. Whoop. So introduction. Why is fertilization important, right? So if you have a green thumb, if you have plants at home, you might already know that you have to periodically add fertilizer to it so that way the plants can continue to be healthy. It's because plants leach nutrients from the soil, and when they're in an isolated environment, they tend to deplete all of the nutrients, and then that's kind of it, right? So if we want our grapevines to be producing well, we need to resupply those nutrients, right? So making sure we have proper fertilization or proper nutrient availability is going to make our vines healthy. It's going to improve our yields and quality of the fruit, and therefore the quality of the wine. So very important. So nutrients can kind of be divvied up into two groups. We have macronutrients and micronutrients. So macro meaning like large, like we need copious amounts, and then micronutrients means we only need a little bit of these things, but they're still essential for the growth and development of the vine, right? So macronutrients are nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, so NPK. However, the best way for you to remember that is nitrogen is extremely important because it supports the growth of the vine and canopy. So think of the green parts, the leafy, helps with chlorophyll production, right? Phosphorus is more involved for root development and energy transfer, but it's also involved in flower and fruit formation. So that's another good one too. Potassium is very involved with sugar transport, disease resistance, and also the ripening process of the grapes. Moving over to micronutrients, we have magnesium, calcium, iron, zinc, and boron. So magnesium helps with photosynthesis. That's part of a lot of essential reactions there. Calcium is strength of cell walls and also root functions. Iron is very important for photosynthesis, but also enzyme production. And then zinc and boron is very commonly applied and needed for flowering and fruit set of vines. So it's important that we know these nutrients because these nutrients get applied at different times depending on the season of your vines and what their requirements are. So if we want to know what type of fertilizers are needed in our vineyard, how much we need to test for what nutrients are currently available and where we might be lacking, right? So it makes sense. So we have to test the soil and test the leaves themselves. If you want to test the soil, you want to determine any deficiencies. It's important because you want to avoid over adding fertilizers. We're going to talk about the detriment of that later. You want to really try to encourage precise fertilization because if you're lacking, the vines will suffer, and if you're adding too much, you're wasting money and harming the environment. So really try to be careful about how much we're adding, right? So how are we going to test? We can test the soil and also the leaf tissues of the vine. You can test typically before the spring growth begins for soil. And soil testing involves a number of things. You can test the soil for water capacity, for depth, for content, for structure, and much more. But if you're testing soil for nutrient analysis, that's typically something that you send into a lab. So that'll be important. So we can test soil and we can test the leaf itself. Soil analysis is helpful, but there are some downfalls to it. So soil analysis will tell you what exists in the soil, but it's only what is potentially available to the grapevine. So it's not, I'm going to highlight this, it's not a complete representation of the soil and root interactions. And that is because there are lots of things involved that can impact whether or not the vine is capable of utilizing those nutrients. So if there's any chemical imbalances in the soil, like the pH is not where it should be, there's high salinity, or if there's an imbalance of the ratio of cations, so magnesium, calcium, potassium, or an excess of boron, it will actually affect whether or not those vines can actually, the roots can actually utilize those nutrients. So that can be a huge block in your vineyard. So that's why that soil testing is so important, but you don't know what's actually in the vine until you test the vine itself. So you really need to measure both in your vineyard. So again, just to reinforce, plant tissue analysis is really the best way to determine which nutrients are present in the actual vine. That's the only way you'll know. Okay, so tissue analysis. There's two major types of tissue analysis in vineyards. There's a petiole sample and then a leaf blade sample. The petiole is the stem that comes off the leaf, as you can see in this picture, and then the leaf blade is the big leafy green part, right? So on that additional presentation I posted that's optional for your learning, it goes into much more detail about tissue and soil analysis and what can prevent your vine from uptaking nutrients and when to sample, how to sample. So if you would like to learn more about that, check out that presentation for sure. So reasons to do tissue analysis can be more than just nutrient levels. It can also be to confirm or deny a pest or other problems with a grapevine as well. But very important, and both are very helpful. Okay, so moving on to different types of fertilizers that are used in viticulture. So there are, three main ones: is organic, inorganic, and then also foliar fertilizers. So organic fertilizers is typically like compost, manure, also green manure. These are organic options, are very good for the soil health itself, not just adding nutrients to the vines, but farming the soil itself and helping microbial activity. So we have here a picture in the upper right corner of tilling. So this is a cover that is what used to be a cover crop, and they're tilling the cover crop into the soil so that way it increases the organic matter, and those plants will start to break down, decompose, and put nutrients back into the soil. So that's helpful, and that's what green manure is. It's when you purposefully plant something with the intention of integrating it into the soil as it decomposes. Then we have inorganic fertilizers, so nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium fertilizers, and also trace element supplements apply to this. These are fast acting and they can be precise nutrient control, but it's really important that we use products that are inorganic in like specific amounts. We don't want to over add and damage our ecosystem or our plants. Next are foliar fertilizers. So they are applied to the foliage, right? The foliage of the grapevine, and it's typically in a spray. And what's really common for these are like micronutrient sprays. They're highly effective. They typically contain zinc, boron, iron. These are things that we spray right before flowering. They get absorbed immediately by the leaves and can be put to use in the plant right away. So we also have a couple really good resources on the slide for you guys. We have a page from the Lodi wine growers about foliar nutrient applications. So if you'd like to learn more about that, you can click on that link. We also have a really cool video on YouTube from Jordan Winery about how to make your own compost fertilizer at home, which is very cool. So really nice step-by-step information. Even if you don't have a vineyard, if you want to start utilizing a compost for your plants in your garden, just great information all around. Cool. So next kind of concept is, now that we know what the nutrients we're looking at are, and we know how they are applied in the different categories, there are different times of the year that these nutrients are utilized, and they should generally be applied to the vineyard. So during the winter time, the vines are inactive, but we're mostly looking at helping the roots with their growth. So for this, we're looking at compost, organic matter, or any pH adjustments that need to be made to the soil. It's the best time to do that. Early spring, we see bud break and shoot growth in our vines. And for this, we need light additions of nitrogen, phosphorus, boron, or zinc, potentially. And again, this isn't a list of things just to go out and apply to your grapevines. You need to do testing first to see if you're actually deficient at any of these things, and to determine how much of these things we need to be adding. Next, we have late spring, which is pre-bloom and flowering, the flowering stage. And for that, you would potentially need phosphorus, potassium, calcium. In the summer, we're looking at fruit development, fruit set, and veraison. And potassium, magnesium, and some micronutrients will be helpful during this time. Late summer to fall, we're looking at the pivotal time of grapefruit, like ripening, and also harvest. And during this time, minimal nitrogen if you actually need it, and potassium. And this is extremely important because for adding nitrogen to the vine while it's trying to ripen fruit, it will actually utilize those resources for more vegetal growth, and it will redirect those resources. So we want the vine to stay focused on ripening the fruit during that time, and not so much on foliage or any other vegetation. After harvest, though, we have a root recovery stage where a lot of nutrients need to go back to the roots, need to be stored up for the winter season, and so that way we can have a good dormancy and enough energy for a successful bud break and begin the following season. So that's important. So for that, you're looking at potassium, phosphorus, and compost. Cool. So just to reinforce considerations, right? Nitrogen, you want to avoid heavy applications after fruit set, right? Just so we talked about, it's going to encourage vegetal growth instead of fruit quality. Potassium is going to be very important for sugar accumulation during veraison. And then micronutrients are typically foliar applications during pre-bloom and early fruit set. So those are very effective at correcting any deficiencies that need to be amended right away. Then there's also post-harvest fertilization, which is critical for nutrient replenishment right before winter dormancy. So kind of just taking the main points of that graph we just saw and putting them into a more easily recognizable language on the slide for you guys. So very important points. Okay, so strategies and best practices, right? So generally, fertilization is seasonal. It depends on what stage of the vineyard is at when you should be fertilizing and what you're using. There's also different types of systems like fertigation. Fertigation is when you create like a cocktail, or you have like a liquid that you inject into your irrigation system. So that's fertigation. So that's very helpful. There's also other sustainable approaches like cover crops to fix nitrogen. This is a way to like naturally bring chemicals, like fix them into your soil, nutrients, not chemicals. And this will help reduce chemical inputs where possible. So again, just better for the environment. It's a win-win for your vineyard and for the surrounding area. So there's lots of risks behind fertilization. I know it might not seem like it because this is something that we just so kind of, I don't want to use the word mindlessly, but we just kind of don't think about. Sometimes we just add, like we just whatever the vineyard needs or whatever our plants need, we just dump it out there and expect results, right? So there's actually a lot of risks of over fertilization. So we talked about this already, but excessive nitrogen, too much vegetal growth. If you have phosphorus and potassium imbalances, it can affect the root's ability to uptake nutrients. And then also there's a key environmental factor here, which is if there's excessive fertilization, you can have runoff and pollution in waterways, which will affect the environment. So not a good time. In addition to that, you can actually harm your soils. You'll have soil degradation. So if you have excessive ammonium-based fertilizers, it'll actually acidify your soil. So you're changing the pH. You can increase the salinity, like the salt content, if you use too much synthetic fertilizer. And then if you have excess phosphorus, you can actually have a complete nutrient lockup of your soil altogether. Like your vine won't be able to acquire anything that's available in the soil. So it's very, very harmful to the soil, but also inconvenient to you as a farmer because you're not producing high quality fruit. Like you've cut off production basically, or you've cut off nutrients to your product, to your vines. So on the positive side of this, for farming groups that are committed to not polluting local water sources and helping to restore local habitat and improve water quality by being careful about applying fertilizers and other products in vineyards, we have something called fish-friendly farming. It's a certification that you can achieve if you follow certain protocols and work with that group. We also have a really interesting article with the US EPA. This is the United States Environmental Protection Agency. There's a really interesting article on pollution with agriculture and forests, unfortunately. And there's some interesting statistics about, agriculture is an extremely important part to the United States economy, and there's so many jobs that are available because of agriculture, and we feed the country, we feed all this food, not just wine, there's all these other products involved in this too. But unfortunately, because we have so much agriculture, we actually destroyed a lot of forest lands, a lot of wildlife, harmed a lot of local ecology. We caused soil erosion, nutrient loss in soils in general. We have like this excess spread of bacteria from livestock, manure, pesticides, and so much have affected water quality. And so in addition to affecting our local, wildlife and environment, we're actually harming ourselves by polluting our water that we even potentially drink. So there's a lot that goes into it, but it is an important thing to consider when we're applying fertilizers, right? We don't want to over apply because we don't want to harm our products, but also harm our environment. So something to think about. Okay, so here in the upper right corner, we have a really nice picture of just over vigorous vines from excessive nitrogen nutrients. So that can be a consequence of too much nitrogen in your vineyard. In an extreme situation, you can even have something called nitrogen toxicity, and that's what this leaf looks like on the bottom right corner. So you can get these brown spots happening around the edges of your leaves. This is not just a symptom for grapevines. It can also be a symptom for like house plants and other plants around your yard. So if you add too much nutrients, it can be toxic for your plants. So a fertilization will definitely improve the quality of your grapes and your resulting wine. If you have a balanced nutrition, you'll have a really good sugar to acid ratio. The vines will perform. The vines will live for a long time. It's good maintenance of your vineyard. If you over fertilize, you can actually have diluted grape flavors because all the energy is going towards vegetation and also producing more clusters now instead of retaining the original number of clusters and then just ripening those, right? So it'll get out of hand. So you want to make sure you have balanced nutrition. Okay, next we're going to look at 3 different regions and how they fertilize their vineyards and how they approach it. The first one is Bordeaux, France. Very famous wine region, of course. A lot of wineries in Bordeaux are taking the organic and biodynamic approach, and this really makes sense because France is so focused on terroir, like that word comes from France. It's a French word, terroir. And even their labeling system is so focused on the vineyard itself and not so much the winery or the producer or even the winemaker or even the variety. It's just, this is the vineyard. So there's a huge emphasis on taking care of the soil, farming the fruit in a way that expresses the land. So they don't want to add any synthetic or any harsh fertilizers that could potentially strip the land of its natural qualities, basically. So ultimately, overall, France is a mild maritime climate with well-drained gravel, limestone, and clay soils. Their nutrient management program focuses on maintaining that soil structure and the microbial activity. So organic compost and manure are highly used for soil enrichment. Green manure through cover crops such as legumes help fix nitrogen naturally. They also use herbal teas, horn manure, and natural soil enhancers from biodynamic farming techniques and very minimal synthetic fertilizers to help preserve that terroir expression. So the impact on the wine quality is that by enhancing the soil biodiversity, we're also affecting the complexity of the grapes and therefore the wine. So this will give us also, the aim is to have lower yields but higher quality grapes with better tannin structure. And a good example of this is Chateau Latour. It's a premier cru estate in Bordeaux, France. They are really implementing organic and biodynamic principles. Their goal is to maintain grape quality, absolutely. So they are a leading vineyard in Bordeaux. They've been around for a very long time. This is what their soil looks like, and part of their vineyard is just very rocky, old, like lake bed kind of soil. Very gorgeous though. So that's their ideology, and those are their farming practices, and that's how it results in the wine. Next, we have Napa Valley, of course, here in our backyard. Very well-known region. People come from all over the world to come see Napa. Their methodology in fertilization is much more precision agriculture and data-driven fertilization. So when you think in Napa, think about high-tech, high-money, very precision-based techniques, right? So the climate and soil in Napa is Mediterranean. We have warm, dry summers and varied soil types. So we have volcanic, sedimentary, and also loam. The vine vigor can be excessive in this area, so it requires very careful nitrogen management. Overall, for the fertilization practices, again, think about precision agriculture. So we're using a lot of soil sensors, real-time data analysis. Fertigation is commonly used in Napa Valley. So we have drip irrigation with dissolved fertilizers within that to really optimize nutrient delivery. We have some foliar applications for rapid corrections, and we also have site-specific fertilization tailored specifically for soil types, grape varieties, plots, you name it. So very specific allocation of nutrients. It's not like one fertilization is applied to the entire vineyard. So very specialized applications there. Cool. So impact on wine quality. Right, so because it's so data-driven and so specific, it reduces unnecessary fertilizer use, which lowers their environmental impact, which is really nice. So they also achieve controlled vine growth as a result of that and optimal grapes. So a really good example of this is Opus 1 in Napa, and this is exactly what they do. And they have very expensive, very nice wines, and they have a very good reputation. So you'll have to check them out. Our last case study is Tuscany, Italy. And Tuscany, Italy is known for typically a traditional and or modern approach to fertilization. So their climate and soil is very Mediterranean, just like Napa, rolling hills, well-drained, mineral-rich soils, which is great. Sangiovese is the king variety that is produced in Tuscany. So that is like the most common grape that you'll see. These grapes will require moderate nutrition to maintain acidity and balance. So for their fertilization practices, you really see a combination of organic and inorganic fertilizers. It's traditional compost mixed with controlled synthetic inputs. They do post-harvest fertilization to restore potassium and phosphorus, minimal nitrogen to avoid that excess canopy growth, and then also ensuring that the berries are full of flavor still. They also use copper and sulfur sprays for disease prevention, which is very common in the industry. Cool. So impact on wine quality, again, different approach to fertilization and farming, but very balanced fruit, balanced fertilization, and are known for their Sangiovese, right? So their methods enhance soil fertility while maintaining a sustainable production. So a really good example of this is Antinori's vineyard, or Antinori winery, in Tuscany. And this is what the winery looks like. It's very modern, very beautiful architecture. This is what the interior looks like for part of the winery. So it's like a staircase situation. And yeah, they have their own version of viticulture to produce high quality grapes for fertilization. Okay, and so that brings us to our student learning objectives. Again, this is really the tip of the iceberg for fertilization, and if you would like to learn more, I really encourage that you look into those other resources. You won't be quizzed on it. You'll only be quizzed from the material in this presentation, but I always try to encourage you guys to spark a curiosity and go out and find your own information and do some research. So check out that information I shared with you guys, and yeah. So hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys next time around.